Before we go any further, I just want it to be known that reading mainstream articles causes me mental anguish,
acute scotoma, severe anxiety, narcolepsy, nightmares, mental trauma, PSPD, emotional distress, hurt feelings, moral hazard, pain and suffering, psychic energy, emotional harm, intellectual disability, academic failure, acute WTF disorder, psychological trauma, and greater damage to the rare cavity.
Messier 87 has swallowed an entire galaxy in the last billion years. Now, observations with ESO's Very Large Telescope have revealed that the giant elliptical galaxy Messier 87 has swallowed an entire medium-sized galaxy over the past billion years. Have found evidence of excessive light coming from the remains of the totally disrupted victim. For the first time, a team of astronomers has been able to track the motions of 300 glowing planetary nebulae to find clear evidence of this event, and also found evidence of excessive light coming from the remains of the totally disrupted victim. I'm trying to picture a galaxy eating another galaxy. It would just become part of that galaxy. But yeah, who knows what it would look like. Astronomers expect that galaxies grow by swallowing smaller galaxies, but the evidence is usually not easy to see. Just as the remains of the water thrown from a glass into a pond will quickly merge with the pond water, the stars in the infalling galaxy merge in with the very similar stars of the bigger galaxy, leaving no trace. But now a team of astronomers led by PhD student Elisa Longobardi at the Max Planck Institute in Garching, Germany, has applied a clever observational trick to clearly show that the nearby giant elliptical galaxy Messier 87 merged with a smaller spiral galaxy in the last billion years. This result shows directly that large luminous structures in the universe are still growing in a substantial way. Galaxies are not finished yet, says Elisa. Look up HALTON C. The large sector of the Messier 87's outer halo now appears twice as bright as it would if the collision had not taken place. Messier 87 is at the center of the Virgo cluster of galaxies. And this is what we think it looks like. But this is what it really looks like. It is a vast ball of stars with a total mass more than a million times that of the Sun, lying about 50 million light years away. Rather than to try to look at all the stars in Messier 87, there are literally billions, and they are too faint and numerous to be studied individually. The team looked at a planetary nebulae, the glowing shells around aging stars, because these objects shine very brightly in a specific hue of aquamarine. They can be distinguished from the surrounding stars. Careful observation of the light from the nebulae using a powerful spectrograph can also reveal their motions. Just as the water from a glass is not visible once thrown into the pond, but many have caused ripples, and other disturbances can be seen if there are particles of mud in the water. The motions of the planetary nebulae, measured using the flames spectrograph on the Very Large Telescope, provide clues to the past merger. We are witnessing a single, recent accretion event where a medium-sized galaxy fell through the center of Messier 87. As a consequence of the enormous gravitational tidal forces, its stars are now scattered over a region that is 100 times larger than the original galaxy, as Ortwin Gerhard, head of the dynamics group at the Max Planck Institute, an extragalactic astronomer and co-author of the new study. The team also looked very carefully at the light distribution in the outer parts of Messier 87, found evidence of extra light coming from the stars in the galaxy that had been pulled in and disrupted. These observations also have shown that the disrupted galaxy has added younger, bluer stars to Messier 87. It was probably a star-forming spiral galaxy before its merger. It is very exciting to be able to identify stars that have been scattered around hundreds of thousands of light years in the halo of this galaxy. Can you imagine being a planet going around a star in the Eaton galaxy? Going around it? but still be able to see from their velocities that they belong to a common structure. The green planetary nebulae are the needles in the haystack of the golden stars, but these rare needles hold the clues to what happened to the stars, concludes co-author Magda Garching, Germany. All right. Black heart. Holes in space and time. We should remember that there was once a discipline called natural philosophy. Unfortunately, this discipline seems to not exist today. It has been renamed science, but science of today is in danger of losing much of the natural philosophy aspect. Hans Elfing. Consensus astronomers believe that gamma rays, X-rays, and radio waves are created by gravity and acceleration in space. Dusty clouds of hydrogen gas are supposed to reach temperatures in the millions of Kelvin, causing gas and dust to glow brightly and emit radiation. In that view, most powerful radiation sources are those that achieve the greatest gravitational force. Cygnus A is one of the first radio sources that revealed jets and lobes accelerating out of its nucleus. They are thought to result from material falling into a central black hole, where it is torn apart. Subatomic debris is then propelled out of the galactic core by some means not understood in consensus circles. It is suggested that spinning magnetic fields surround black holes, but the theory cannot be tested. Among the many difficulties faced by mainstream astrophysics is how magnetic fields can align and compress particle emissions into gas that maintain coherency. Radio jets from some galaxies reach out for over 1 million light years before they disperse into vast clouds of radio-emitting particles, larger than their galactic sources. Recently, the astronomical community announced their first image of a black hole. Researchers from the Max Planck Institute for Radio Astronomy in Bonn, Germany, and the Institute of Die Radioastronomie, IRAM, using the Event Horizon Telescope, captured what they believe is an image of a black hole. What is that visual evidence? The press release states that a ring-like structure with a dark central region, the black hole's shadow. This ring appears in multiple separate observations using different imaging methods, making the scientists involved confident that they have indeed captured the shadow of a black hole. The important factor missing in their observation is that the magnetic fields mentioned in the press release are electromagnetic and not simply magnetic. The only way to generate a magnetic field is with a flow of electric charge, or electricity. As written in previous pictures of the day, radio bright celestial objects are not created in gravity fields, no matter how powerful. Laboratory experiments most easily produce them by accelerating charged particles through an electric field, rather than gravity. An electromagnetic entity, called a plasmoid, is responsible for jets, lobes, and other objects in space. Many people need to learn about this plasmoid. As far as black holes are concerned, there are no experiments that show evidence for matter collapse to near infinite density. It is Bennett pinches, Z pinches, in plasma state material that form plasmoids. When the electric flux inside double layers within galactic circuits gets too high, there is a sudden short circuit that draws energy from the surrounding space. The energy could be concentrated from hundreds of cubic light years and then discharged in a burst of cosmic lightning, generating X-rays or flares of ultraviolet light. Instead of a black hole, a plasmoid in M87's heart is ramping up charged particles so electrons spiral in the electromagnetic fields and give off X-rays and radio emissions. The idea that electricity flows through the universe is resisted by today's consensus, so its influence and attributes are unseen. It is true that some physicists discuss magnetism, and some even describe what they believe to be electric currents in galactic jets. It is not a widely accepted idea, though. It has long been said that seeing is believing. However, it should not be surprising that believing is seeing appears to be more apt when there is no inner experience, such as a theory. Outer realities remain invisible, such is the case with cosmic electric fields and the flow of electric charge through the universe. Stephen Smith, hat tip to William Thompson. Indeed.
The SAFIRE technology was designed and built to replicate the atmosphere of the Sun in a laboratory on Earth, and to test the electric sun model. These are the factors we control. These are some of the things the SAFIRE lab is now capable of. These are some of our recent discoveries. In our tests and experiments, we have found no disparities with the electric sun model. In fact, all the evidence to date indicates that electricity is the primal force in the universe.
Interstellar medium, one from the world of cells. Same thing, interstellar medium, world of cells. This is my favorite. Two of those are from the world of biology, two are views of something going on in our galaxy. So this is not an accident that they look the same, and it's not an artifact of our instruments. The reason these two worlds look so similar is because in many ways they are similar. We live in a living universe. The cosmology that we grew up with is dead. And I don't mean dead as in over with. I mean it only talks about dead things. Stars are supposedly dead. Galaxies are supposedly dead. The whole universe is supposedly dead, and only you and I are alive. Only you and I. The profoundness of this absurdity needs to be re-examined. Astrophysics will be stuck until it can acknowledge that the objects it studies are alive, just like you and me, and our little cells.
Double layers in laboratory and cosmic plasmas. The Helicon Double Layer Thruster, HDLT, credit Australian National University Research, School of Physical Sciences and Engineering. Electric double layers are like waterfalls that energize charged particles falling through them. We have to learn again that science without contact with experiments is an enterprise which is likely to go completely astray into imaginary conjecture. Hans Elfing. A double layer forms in plasma when electric charge flows through it. Double layers are found in the plasma environment of Earth, as well as around the stars, creating phenomena like aurorae and electromagnetic radiation from pulsars, thermal emissions from hot filaments in light bulbs, LED plasma, lead plasma pioneer Irving Langmuir, to contemplate that the behavior of charged particles moving through various gases. He was the first to coin the term plasma when referring to such ionized gas, since charged regions in gas tend to isolate themselves from the environment, as well as act in ways not governed by mechanical theories. He thought they appeared similar to the organic plasma component of cells. So he used biology-based terminology. I don't think it's way off base either. There might even be something to that, mimicking cells with the living cell galaxy theory. Scientists from the National University Research School of Physical Sciences and Engineering in Canberra discovered double layers in their laboratory plasma systems, finding that they were accelerating eons to supersonic velocities. The double layers are self-generating, so the effect has been incorporated into an efficient spacecraft thrust mechanism. As mentioned, a double layer is an electric charge separation region that forms in plasma. It consists of oppositely charged parallel layers, resulting in a voltage drop in electric field across the layer, which accelerates the plasma's electrons and positive ions in opposite directions. Since moving electric charges generate electricity, there is an electric current present if there are sufficiently large potential drops in layer separation. Electrons might accelerate to relativistic velocities, producing synchrotron radiation. Nobel Prize winner Hans Elfing described a double layer as a plasma formation by which a plasma, in the physical meaning of this word, protects itself from the environment, and it's analogous to a cell wall by which plasma, in the biological meaning of this word, protects itself from the environment. Isn't that interesting? Just about everything has some kind of self-protection mechanism. Electric forces can accelerate charged particles with energies of 10 to the power of 20 electron volts or more. Since electricity requires a circuit for charge to flow, and an electric current forms a magnetic field, that field tends to constrict the current. As pointed out in previous Picture of the Day articles, that constricted channel is known as a Bennett pinch, or Z-pinch. The pinched filaments of electric current remain coherent over large distances. Laboratory experiments with particle accelerators confirm the observation. Plasma's behavior is driven by conditions in those circuits. Fluctuations can form double layers with large potential voltages between them. The electric force in double layers can be much stronger than those from gravitational or mechanical forces. Double layers separate plasma into cells and filaments that can have different temperatures or densities. At times, a double layer might interrupt charge flow in the circuit, causing a catastrophic rise in voltage across it. The powerful energy release of the expanding double layer is sometimes observed in power transmission switch yards when a circuit breaker is opened incorrectly. I think we've all seen those. Hans Alfvén identified just such an occurrence when he was contracted by the Swedish power company to investigate some serious accidents that had occurred. A few of the mercury arc rectifiers used in the power transmission circuits had exploded for no apparent reason. Alfvén identified the cause as unstable double layers within the plasma flow. He wrote, "In Sweden, the water power is located in the north, and the industry in the south. The transfer of power between these regions over a distance of about 1,000 kilometers was first done with AC, when it was realized that DC transmission would be cheaper. Mercury rectifiers were developed. It turned out that such a system normally worked well, but it happened now and then that rectifiers in Europe produced enormous overvoltages, so that fat electrical sparks filled the rectifying station and did considerable harm. An arc rectifier must have a very low pressure of mercury vapor in order to stand the high back voltages during half of the AC cycle. On the other hand, it must be able to carry large currents during the other half cycle. It turned out that these two requirements were conflicting. Because of very low pressure, the plasma could not carry enough current. If the current density is too high, an exploding double layer may be formed. This means that in the plasma, a region of high vacuum is produced. The plasma refuses to carry any current at all. At the sudden interruption of the 1,000 kilometer inductance, produces enormous overvoltages, which may be destructive. There are also double layers in space that emit radio wave over a broad band of frequencies. They can sort galactic material into regions of like composition and condense it. They can accelerate charged particles to cosmic ray energies. Double layers in space can explode for the same reason as Alfvén's rectifiers, releasing more energy than is locally present. This effect can be seen in stellar flares or so-called nova outbursts. Let's just hope the sun never does that. Since plasma is composed of charged particles, their movement constitutes an electric current which generates a magnetic field. Electrons spiral in the resulting magnetic field, creating synchrotron radiation that can shine in all high energy frequencies, including extreme ultraviolet, X-rays, and gamma rays. According to Alfvén and others, electric power flows along the spiral arms of a galactic circuit, where it is concentrated and stored in a central plasmoid within the galactic bulge. When the current density reaches a critical threshold, the plasmoid discharges along the galaxy's spin axis as an energetic jet of plasma. The phenomenon has been replicated in the laboratory with a plasma focus device. Cosmic plasmas and their activity can be replicated in the laboratory, allowing insights into the large-scale structures that populate the universe. Since gravitational forces cannot be examined in the laboratory, or laboratory, if you choose, consensus opinions about the gravity-only model of celestial objects suffer from a moribund condition. Hopefully, a fresh perspective will
I think it's reasonable to start about 100 years ago. And about 100 years ago, almost everybody in astronomy, without question, assumed that the whole of the universe was what you could see in the Milky Way. Nobody felt that the universe was any bigger than the stars that you see in the sky, associated with our own local Milky Way. And that was the situation certainly around 1905, times like that. They're well known. People who propounded these ideas. 10 years later, Einstein first proposed his general theory of relativity. Now, when Einstein proposed this, it's a theory of gravity, which means that it's a theory which should represent the whole of the universe, because it's gravitational forces that are controlling the universe. Well, Einstein made this theory around 1915, and he immediately wanted to try and use this theory to explain the universe as it then was, the so-called Milky Way system. But of course, the idea of this was that it was a static system. That is, it wasn't contracting or expanding, it was a static system. And Einstein found that his equations did not allow for a static universe unless he inserted a certain constant in the mathematics, which became known as the cosmological constant. But what happened in the early 1920s was that a very clever Russian called Friedman in 1922 found solutions to Einstein's equations which allow the universe to either expand or contract. Now that was done in the Soviet Union soon after the revolution, and nobody in the West knew about this, I think. But in 1927, a Belgian priest, the Abbé Lemaitre, as he later became, also discovered these solutions. And he went to England, and his work was publicized in Cambridge and elsewhere, and the famous English astronomer Sir Arthur Eddington and others got to know about this, and they immediately began to say, how can this apply to the current universe? Well, in the same period, in 1929, Hubble made what I still believe was the most important discovery in extragalactic astronomy. Nobody in the West knew about this, I think. But in 1927, a Belgian priest, the Abbé Lemaitre, as he later became, also discovered these solutions. And he went to England, and his work was publicized in Cambridge and elsewhere, and the famous English astronomer Sir Arthur Eddington and others got to know about this, and they immediately began to say, how can this apply to the current universe? Well, in the same period, in 1929, Hubble made what I still believe was the most important discovery in extragalactic astronomy in the last century, or the last century but one. He showed that if you look at the spiral nebulae, the faint spiral nebulae, the shifts in their spectra are proportional to their apparent brightnesses. And this led very soon to the idea that this fitted very well with the expanding universe, and that indeed this is the kind of universe we lived in, that what we were looking at are galaxies, Milky Ways, further and further away from us, and the further away from us, the larger the redshifts, and if that's interpreted in the way that most people would interpret it, this means that they are moving away faster and faster. So this was the original idea. By the 1930s, the front page of the New York Times said, we live in an expanding universe.
When Hubble made his great discovery, it was for galaxies like our own Milky Way galaxy, and they all followed the same rule, that the fainter they are, the larger their redshift. In other words, the faster they are moving away from us. This is known as the Hubble law, and directly led to the expanding universe theories. But in the 1960s, there was a new discovery, the quasi-stellar objects, often referred to as quasars. They appear as star-like points on the sky, frequently blue in color, and they have very, very large redshifts, implying that they are at huge distances from the Earth, at the very boundaries of the observable universe. Some astronomers soon found that a vast number of these strange new objects populated the regions around spiral galaxies, and were not only observable with radio telescopes, but were optical and X-ray sources as well. There were two properties of the quasars that were difficult for astronomers to understand using the expanding universe theory. The first was that if one plotted their apparent brightness against their redshifts, as one does for galaxies, one gets an unexpected scatter on the diagram, instead of the smooth curve made by the same plot done for galaxies. This seems to indicate that the quasars do not follow the Hubble law as do most other objects, and that there is no direct indication that they are actually at their proposed redshift distances. In fact, it is argued that if Hubble had first been given the plots for quasars, he and other astronomers would never have concluded that the universe was expanding. The second property was that quasars are very small, compact objects, sometimes only a light year across. So if quasars are really at their extreme redshift distances, they must then be the brightest and most energetic objects known to astronomers. So energetic, in fact, that untestable, almost metaphysical mechanisms must be applied to explain the phenomena. On the other hand, when placed at their observed distances, that is, in the neighborhood of nearby galaxies, their brightness and energies become normal, and no special mechanisms need to be evoked. This problem has led many astronomers to abandon the idea that all redshifts are due to their speed of recession away from the Earth. And if this is true, then there is no need for an expanding universe, and the Big Bang never happened. The questions arise. Is there a connection between certain types of galaxies and the quasar? Are quasars ejected from galaxies, and in fact proto-galaxies themselves? Is there some other astrophysical process which can explain the redshift discrepancies? One of the world's most controversial experts on the structure and morphology of quasars, HALTON C. has for 35 years proposed just such an idea. For the heresy of opposing orthodox interpretations of the redshift problem, has had to pay a heavy price, the same price paid by many a scientist with new and innovative ideas. Dr. was forced to resign from his permanent position at the Carnegie Institute of Washington Observatories after the Caltech head of the Telescope Allocation Committee threatened him by saying, unless he changed his line of research, they would take away his telescope time. Due to this fact and his ongoing struggle against the established paradigms, is often referred to as the modern Galileo.
I remember when I sent the paper into, the first paper into Astrophysical Journal on the nature of companion galaxies, and I had a lot of them on the ends of spiral arms, so I was sure that they were connected, and I showed that they were systematically redshifted. I sent that in with naive, great expectations that people would be terribly interested and impressed on this. And the editor of the Astrophysical Journal at that time was Subramanian Chandrasekhar, who had a fantastic reputation as a master theoretician and also quite an incomprehensible theoretician, and a tremendously powerful figure in the field, and editor of the Astrophysical Journal, which is probably the most powerful position in the field. And he chose not to, in his wisdom and judicial fairness, chose not to send it to a referee, but he just wrote across the paper, "This exceeds my imagination," and he sent it back to the director of my institute, Horace Babcock, with the obvious implication, you've got to do something about this staff member of yours who's doing these very bad things. And so Horace called me down in the office one day after this, and I walked in his office, into the director's office, and I saw this paper lying in front of him with Chandrasekhar's scroll across it. And Horace looked at me and said, well, he said, this is just too much, and you're going to have to start looking for another job. And so all I could say to him was, well, if you send me that in writing, please send me in writing. And I was waiting in great trepidation for weeks and months to get something in writing, and I finally never did, so I realized that he decided to give me another chance, so to speak. So that was fairly early in the game, and then some years went by, and there was the competition for time, particularly on the 200-inch telescope, was getting more and more heated, and people were saying, well, we can't continue to give time to this obviously incorrect and embarrassing research that ARP does. So finally they sent a letter to me from the allocation committee, including a number of the younger members of my institute, saying that unless I changed my line of research, that they would have to take away my telescope time. At that point, I considered the situation very carefully, and I figured that the evidence, although a lot more evidence could be gathered and has since been gathered since then, the important thing was not the evidence, because if it was true, it would come out someday. The important thing was the principle of scientific investigation, whether scientists could follow new lines of investigation and follow up on evidence which apparently contradicted the current theorems and the current paradigms. And I also felt that regardless of what happened to me personally, that this was the important issue, and that I had no choice but to resign on the point of this issue, so that if it developed, which I thought it would, that my line of investigation was correct, that people then in the future would say, okay, this was the wrong thing to do, and in the future we're going to have to see that this kind of thing doesn't happen again.
The observers come in now with the belief that we live in a Big Bang universe, and therefore all of their ways of understanding things are tailored to that. And they don't come in with the possibility that our alternative, or any other for that matter, is right, and really do it in an open-minded way.
Problem with graduate education. I think graduate education is not teaching students to think.
They were initially at high redshift, and the redshift decayed as time went on, and therefore we were looking at a physics that was operating in the universe in which matter was born with low mass and with very high redshift, and as it matured and evolved into our present form, that we were seeing the birth and evolution of galaxies in the universe.
If proto-quasars ejected from the nucleus of active galaxies themselves evolve into new, younger galaxies, astrophysicists must find experimentally and observationally the mechanisms which describe this phenomena. One model explains that the proto-quasars are ejected, trapped in the galaxy's extreme magnetic field, aligned along the spiral arms, thus explaining the torn, disturbed features often observed in the galactic medium, and the frequent appearance of high redshift companion galaxies attached by filaments to a lower redshift parent galaxy. The other and most frequently observed alignment is when quasars appear to have been directly ejected out of the galaxy's active nucleus along its line of least resistance, creating a field of systematically high to low redshift quasars, or younger to older evolved protogalaxies. This is exemplified in innumerable systems like the one around the galaxy quasar field of NGC 3516. If one disregards the proposed redshift distance to these objects, observation clearly points to ejection as a likely explanation for their close vicinity to the central galaxies around which they are found. These results, though preliminary, are promising developments which may lead the way to new and exciting insights in cosmology.
One of the best and earliest of the really controversial things was a Seyfert galaxy known as NGC 4319, which Chip Arp discovered that it has a protrusion coming out in the south direction from it, one of its spiral arms, and ending up on another galaxy known as Markarian, and people have tried to explain it away in all kinds of ways and tried to take false pictures to show that it's not there. But I've seen the good pictures, which were the first really good pictures were taken by Jack Sulentic.
NGC 4319 was part of some work that I did in the early 80s when I was a young astronomer, a young faculty member, and people were coming up to me and saying, oh, I've written a paper to show that what Chip Arp has done is wrong. There were at least 3 famous papers right around 79, 80, 81, and it took about 5 minutes to look at these papers to see that they were flawed. And one of them was a paper that claimed to show no connection between NGC 4319 and the quasar Markarian 205. So at that time I had the opportunity to work at JPL using the new image processing facilities that had been developed for the Voyager program, in fact. And it took 1 hour's effort to show that there was some kind of a luminous feature between those 2 objects. I don't know what it is, but there's no question that there is a luminous feature, and it cannot be dismissed in the ways that it was dismissed in the early 80s.
Suddenly there appeared press releases from Space Telescope Science Institute, which was the research arm of NASA's Hubble Space Telescope, and this press release said that they were not connected, and it gave a Hubble Space Telescope picture. It was not very deep, and you could just see 2 objects and no connection between them. And in this press release, then they said that this proved that there was no contradiction with the current expanding universe paradigm.